Okay, everybody, welcome back to the On the Ball video podcast from the Vanderbilt Sports and Society Initiative. Really excited to have Jesse Sanchez with us today from Major League Baseball, where he directs MLB's talent diversity outreach efforts. Great guy from Phoenix, Arizona. And Jesse, I think you've been with MLB for over 2 decades in various roles there. I know you were a beat reporter covering the Rangers for a while, now moved into more of a MLB wide position. I think you got your start in Dallas or Fort Worth, right? At the newspaper there, the Telegram, and like an agate clerk, like doing the grunt work, and you've worked your way up to a pretty influential position in MLB. So thank you so much for joining us today.
No, thank you, Andrew. I really appreciate the invite, and anything I can share to help folks and share my story. Like I always tell everybody, I don't have all the answers, but what I can do is like share my experience and be honest and transparent, and hopefully help some people avoid some of the pitfalls and things that mistakes I've made, and to advance their career and whatever they deem as success. I'd like to help people get to that goal.
Oh, that's awesome. And yeah, I would love to talk to you about what you're doing to, expand the pipeline, diversify the pipeline of candidates for jobs at MLB. Talk a little bit about your career path. I was a kid that always wanted to work in Major League Baseball. Also, first I wanted to play, of course. Like I wanted to be a shortstop for the Brewers. Realized in high school that was never going to happen. And then when I was in college, I remember applying for jobs with every MLB team and getting rejected by every team. But like I still saved those rejection letters because it was cool just to get a letter back that had the team logo on the letterhead. Like it was exciting to get rejected. And then eventually I worked for the Rays as their media relations manager. I mean, they were building a whole new staff, so there were a few more opportunities then. But yeah, I guess first of all, tell us about your path. Were you a kid that was always interested in journalism or baseball, and what experiences early on did you have that kind of set you on this path eventually?
Looking back, and like the people who've known me since I was, elementary or high school or junior high or whatever, they'd say, "Oh, it makes sense you're a sports writer or you work in the sports field because you played sports. Your dad was always the coach. You're a huge baseball fan. I grew up in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, so I was a Texas Ranger fan, Dallas Mavericks, Dallas Cowboys. Later on, the Dallas Stars came like in the mid to late 90s. They were there. So I grew up a big sports fan. In the area where I grew up in Dallas-Fort Worth, high school sports is huge. It was a big deal. I mean, the training and the preparation even starts at junior high. If you think about that, like high school, there are junior high football programs that feed into the high school programs. So you have seventh and eighth grade kids running similar offenses to what their varsity thing is. So it was always a big part of my life. And from my parents, they just kind of instilled in me the value of education and working hard and how important schoolwork is. I'm the first person in my family to go to college. They really worked hard to put me in that position. They sacrificed a lot and did a lot to help me do that. So I was always a pretty good student, sometimes by choice, sometimes by my parents forcing me to be a good student, but it paid off. So in retrospect, looking back, people say, "Oh, it makes sense because you were like a good storyteller. You're kind of a clown, always telling stories. You were a writer. You love sports. It kind of matches up." But frankly, when I graduated from college, I thought I was going to be an elementary school teacher.
Okay.
Uh, so back in my, I grew up in basically two neighborhoods. One was like an inner city neighborhood, and then later on in elementary, I moved to the suburbs, which were totally different environments, moving from, a very diverse place to the burbs at that time where I was the diversity in that
Okay.
school. So that was a huge adjustment. But it also helped me understand the similarities and the differences and the bridges between different communities. One thing I saw early on was the misconceptions, the stereotypes on both sides of the neighborhoods.
Okay.
my old neighborhood and my new neighborhood. So it helped me be a bridge early on. I always felt like I was a bridge between communities, being able
Okay.
to speak Spanish, being able to speak English, kind of understanding all these different things. So that was something that was important to me. I thought I was going to be an elementary school teacher, be a teacher in my old neighbor, the very first neighborhood in the city. Give back to my community. It wasn't very many male teachers at the time. There really wasn't any diverse male teachers, even less. So that's what I thought I was going to do. So while I was waiting to get my teacher certification, I got a part-time job at the Fort Worth Star Telegram as a part-time agate clerk. Uh,
Hmm.
and actually, before I was a part-time agate clerk, I was extremely part-time. I was like a stringer on Friday night footballs. We take box scores on Friday night football. It's a big deal in Texas. So coaches would call in and they'd give you all the stats, and you're typing them in and running, rushing, passing yards, kicking, you name it. We're writing.
Yeah.
Someone used to type up all those things,
I
and
used to do that too for
yeah.
the Austin American Statesman when I was high school and college intern. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's what I did. So I started there doing agate, um, and then and that became a part-time agate role, full-time agate role. I've always had an interest in stories and storytelling and writing. I was a history and political science major, so that's something I always really valued and thought about. For me, the key was learning how to write as a reporter, as a newspaper reporter. And I had a lot of mentors who helped me in terms of leads, of graphs, of formulas, all those kinds of things uh, to put it in a format that would fit in a newspaper. So worked at a newspaper for 4 years covering high school sports, part-time, agate, full-time agate, community news, you name all that stuff. And in 2001, MLB Advanced Media started, which is known now as MLB.com. So
Hmm.
in 2001, I became the first Texas Rangers beat reporter, Texas Rangers.
Okay. How did you get that job with like this new enterprise? How did that happen?
So it's a funny story. So 2001, MLB Advanced Media was looking for beat reporters at every ballpark, every market. And I had some affiliation, some experience with the Rangers, only because I do a story on the food, the new menu.
Okay.
I do a story on the walk-up music. I did a story on the clubhouse attendance. So I got actually kind of related story. The general manager for the Angels, his name is Perry Manassian. I wrote a story about him and his family when he was just a kid, because his dad was a clubhouse manager for the Rangers.
Okay.
Perry was a clubhouse attendant. His brother Zach Jr., who now works in the front office for the Giants, was also a clubhouse, a clubby.
Yeah.
So I've known those guys. It's just a trip to see Perry as a GM and his brother Zach Jr. as this rising star in the Giants, because I remember them doing
That's
that
great.
story on them. So when the story came, the job came open, I had a familiarity with the organization. We covered high school sports like they were pros, and that's,
Yeah.
for better or worse, that's how we covered them. The level of accountability and readership and competitiveness, all that stuff. So in that way, it wasn't a transition. It was just kind of learning how to operate in a pro environment. Being bilingual 100% helped. Being able
Hmm.
to navigate an entire clubhouse, English speakers, Spanish speakers, people from different parts of the world, huge advantage for me. So I did that for around 5 years or so. Texas Rangers beat reporter. Uh, we saw the need for the lack of bilingual sports reporters, or specifically baseball reporters. There are some that existed, but it's just, and there's a lot more now than there has been. But really, at that time, there was a need there. So I
Hmm.
went into a more national role, and I wrote about a lot of Latino players, issues, countries, big leaguers, you name it. Travel to all those different countries. You just think it's been very fortunate from a kid from a very small town uh, who moved to Fort Worth, where the city was, to
Hmm.
travel to Cuba, Dominican, Venezuela, Puerto Rico several times, go all over Mexico, Central America, all these places that I just read about in history books or magazines.
Yeah.
You
Real
know,
quick, when you would conduct an interview in Spanish with a Spanish speaking player, did you always then write the article in English, or were you also at times writing for MLB.com Spanish versions of the stories?
oh, they were English. They were
Yeah.
English versions. all
Okay.
English versions. And in the quotes, I'd say, Jesse Sanchez said in Spanish. I'd translate that. And
Yeah. Did you ever run into any like resistance from the other sports writers in the clubhouse if you were interviewing a player in Spanish? I had a friend who was covering the Tampa Bay Rays, who he speaks Spanish, and sometimes I got the sense that he felt like it wasn't fair, but that some of his colleagues thought that he was getting like information or scoops that they couldn't get because they didn't speak Spanish, and he felt like, well, learn Spanish then, but what was that environment like for you?
you definitely felt different. And maybe there was an underlying sense of, I don't know, resentment, or I'm not sure what the phrasing is, but it wasn't
Mm-hmm.
the most comfortable feeling.
It
Uh,
wasn't. Okay.
Only because it's in a competitive advantage, to
Yeah.
be able to communicate with every single person in that clubhouse. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just a huge advantage. So you get to tell the stories of the American-born players
Yeah.
and stories from Latino country, born in the Caribbean or Latin America.
Yeah.
It wasn't overt, but you get eye rolls and things like that, and sometimes you have to feel where you feel like you want to translate for everybody because you want to fit in, right?
Oh, okay.
You don't, because you see these people every day, and it's like you want to. Sometimes you kind of feel obligated to help. Um, it's a very personal, it's a very kind of difficult situation to be in. I
Yeah.
don't people are in that situation as much anymore. There's a lot more awareness, there's understanding, there's a lot more people speak Spanish, there's a lot more, there's translators in the clubhouse,
Right. Yeah.
so there
Well, what a
wasn't.
great example of the value of diversity,
Yeah.
But yeah, you mentioned the translators. I wanted to ask you about that. Like a little bit off topic here. We'll come back to your career, but just as a baseball fan, you notice the Japanese players have had translators that are maybe in uniform or that come out to the mound. The Spanish speaking players haven't had that over the years, but it seems like that's changing a little bit. Just observing, like, is that true?
I think so. I think you're seeing so one thing that happens when the players from Latin America or the Caribbean, they sign and they go into these academies in the Dominican Republic. They're all offered English classes as part of the curriculum, So in addition to the other studies they're doing and their baseball activities, everyone's getting English classes. So that's a huge advantage to be able to, especially when Spanish is your first language, and to be exposed to English. And then from when you get to United States in the big league clubhouse, this probably happened over the last, I don't know, decade or maybe less than that, where you see hired translators in there. What would happen previously? It would be a first base coach, or
Mm-hmm.
you would see another player would translate for his teammate. I've even seen where clubhouse attendants would serve as a translator. And what you're
Mm-hmm.
seeing now is more uniformed efforts across the league, across the team, because I think everyone sees the value in everybody's story, the
Yeah.
value of the market, the value of the reality is a lot of these players, their first language is Spanish. So even though they can speak English and they can defend themselves, that isn't the same thing as being fully bilingual. That isn't
Mm-hmm.
the same thing as being able to um, understand the nuances of the language and picking the right words. And a lot of times when you're quoting someone and speaking
Mm-hmm.
English, you just assume or you think they're speaking correct English. So in addition to the translators, there's a lot more awareness and understanding in terms of trying to communicate with players. And that's
Mm-hmm.
players from all over the globe. If you look up and down the rosters, man, I mean, they're from everywhere.
Yeah.
They're from Latin America, Caribbean, they're from Asia, all across the US. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I saw a stat on MLB site said last year there were 269 international born players from 19 different countries on MLB rosters last year. All right, so continuing with your career path, you covered the Rangers, and then you took another job at MLB.com that has eventually led to what you're doing now. Is that right?
Right. So, the Rangers, national reporter focused on Latino issues, countries, players, while still covering, all the English speakers. I've been to like 20 World Series and 20 All-Star games and the
Wow.
Caribbean Series and all kinds of really blessed to be able to do that. I mean, it's not lost on me how fortunate I am to be able to do that. Um, a part of that duty was covering international prospects. Before they would sign on July 2nd. Now they sign on January 15th is when, major league teams can really get a chance to get talent acquisition from all across the globe. So I did
Hmm.
that for a long time. And maybe for the past 2.5 years, close to 3 years, I've been a director of let me see, talent development and diversity outreach for
Okay.
content, and specifically for the content. We do have uh, for the entire league a DEI and directors who are over the entire league. I'm specifically, I mean, although we work in partnership with them, I am the content side of that.
Okay.
So,
And what
so
does
that
MLB consider content to be?
So content is going to be the website, MLB.com. A lot of things you're going to see on there. And under the umbrella of MLB.com, you're going to see social media. You're going to see, tap stories, different way, video, um, all those different, pretty much everything you can see on when you go to MLB.com in terms of generating content creation, the stories, the features, the news. But also, one thing we're also trying to create pipelines with, in addition to those areas, are areas like revenue, products, uh, different areas that also exist within content. And one of the things I like to tell people, because we grew up thinking the only path to Major League Baseball is to play, or to
Hmm.
coach, or to
Right.
write, or to write.
Right.
And after playing, everything else is secondary because we all want to be major leaguers growing up, right? So,
Mhm.
and what I tell everybody is like MLB. It's a huge ecosystem of business. It's everything you can think of in terms of a company exists in MLB. What I mean by that is there's legal departments, there's communications, there's marketing, there's the content, there's there's HR, there's all these different career paths once you get into MLB, and that's not something I was familiar with or grew up thinking. I thought the only way I could be involved in MLB was to be a player. And one of the things I really like to convey to everybody is almost every specialty that you're in, whether it's technology or there's a place there that exists within MLB that's doing that type of
Hmm.
so that's not something I thought about. And that's really something I want people to know that no matter what your degree is or specialty or your experience, um, not only is it a welcoming, safe place, it's also a place where you can use that field to, have a job in baseball.
Okay. And so this position you have now that's you know, seeking fresh blood in Major
Yeah.
League Baseball
Yeah.
and diverse candidates, this pipeline. Did this position already exist? Is it something you created, or how did this role come about?
Well, it didn't exist. It didn't exist. I think a lot of people had a hand in the creation of it.
Hmm.
I'll give my managers and the VPs and Greg Clayman, a guy named Matt Myers, Billy Bean from the DEI side, and
Hmm.
Catalina Vegas also from DEI side, and all the way up to the commissioner. To have the awareness and the foresight to recognize um, what's happening in the country, what's happening in the industry, and how we need to improve overall, right? I think people are doing their best, but there can always be levels of improvement. And I think for me, I was uniquely qualified because of my experience as a reporter, my experience communicating with people, my experience dealing with all these different journalist organizations, whether it's an Association of Hispanic Journalists or Black Journalists or Association of Women in Sports Media. And since then, we've really expanded and strengthened our relationships with, the LGBTQ Journalists Association, the Center for Journalists with Disabilities, Indigenous Journalists Association. I mean, every group you can think of, we're really trying to uh, let folks know about opportunity and letting folks know that there's a place in baseball for everyone, um, and that we're seeking top qualified talent for everyone. And for me, it's something I'm really passionate about. It's something I really care about. I like to provide opportunity. I like to provide mentorship and guidance and set pathways so people can kind of fulfill whatever they deem as success. So as in my current role, I manage seasonal reporters. very diverse group, but it's groups from all over the country, seasonal reporter producers. I am also recently going to start managing, or I am managing, our internship program for content. So that's fairly new. And I'm also director of our digital content diversity fellowship, and this 2024 will be our second year. And again, the whole goal is, baseball is a global game made up of people all across the world. And the more different types of lenses and perspectives and conversations you can have, the broader your reach is going to be. So what we're trying to do is, multiply and triple or quadruple the number of different types of lenses that tell these stories, that share the content, that create the content, that reflect the stance, that
Mhm.
reflect communities, that reflect society at large. I'm born in Texas, so I understand what that's like, being American born, understand that. And then also, being traveling with family in Mexico and grandparents and all that, and understanding the different cultures that exist in the country and the different levels of understanding. And one thing we really try to do is just tell all the stories for everyone, and so as manager, so I guess the long version is saying, I manage the seasonal reporters. I'm part of the
Mhm.
recruiting for that. I manage our internship program, and I'm a director of our fellowship. And I'm
Okay.
also, yeah, so it's something I really enjoy. And uh, there's half of the people know me as the reporter who's been a reporter for
Right.
24 years, and then there's this whole group of section out there of directors and managers who just know me as a talent acquisition, outreach, talent development guy. So it's kind of neat to kind of operate in both worlds.
Yeah. All right. So for people who are watching this and they're interested, what is the difference between a seasonal reporter, a fellow, and an intern in terms of their job responsibilities, but also in terms of the level of experience or, type of person you're looking for each of those roles?
Okay, I'll start with the internship. The internship is a 10-month program that starts, might be the end of May or the very beginning of June. Those, you can still be in college when you're doing that. You can be a recent grad. It's a paid internship, and they'll help with coverage of teams in New York. If it's a New York-based uh, opportunity, that will help with some of the coverage. They will also help with new initiatives in terms of web publishing, in terms of newsletters. 10 weeks isn't a whole lot of time, but we try to squeeze as many different opportunities within those 10 weeks. And not only is there value in like learning those skills, there's, for me, as someone who's focused on building pipelines and relationships, it's our first opportunity to get eyeballs on people and to build a relationship and see where the next step would be. And the next step after the internship is a seasonal reporter producer job. And those, they are, in many ways, they're a backup beat writer based in several different cities. They also publish through content management system, get the stuff actually on the web, write community stories, write baseball coverage, write newsletters. It's a pretty good gig, and it starts, it's a seasonal, so it starts around February or March, and depending on which market you're in, it can last through October,
Yeah.
and we're looking for, and there we need people who are college graduates, because our workload starts in March, probably at the very latest starts in March, and we need people to be available. So if you graduate in December, you're eligible for this,
Mhm.
and it's not so much as the qualifications. I'm looking for availability, and it's hard to ask someone who's a student to do this full time and be committed full time when they're still trying to, find their footing, or try to graduate.
Mhm.
So that's early career. I just couldn't classify them as early career, and
Okay.
then for the fellowship, same thing, early career people who are who are graduates. It can be, 1 to 4 years since graduation. People who are early in their career, who want to develop as reporters, who want to develop as web publishers, who want to develop as social media The long-term goal is to create this diversity content fellowship that touches all reaches of content, and whether that's the actual writing, whether that's the reporting, whether it's social media, whether it's helping content strategy, whether it's content products. The goal is to touch base on all the different levels of content. And I think we've been able to, last year, we are very happy with our fellows who, uh, did a good job for us and really put themselves in a good spot to be appealing candidates, not only for us, but for the industry. And
Mhm.
that's the goal for me, is to get folks hired. And of course, the first goal is like get them we want to hire them, right?
Yeah.
But if they go somewhere else, that's also a win. That's something I encourage, and that's something I'm happy about when people say, "Hey, Jess, I got another job offer. Um, you can't afford me." You know, I was like, great. Those are bittersweet words, but I like hearing that. And so our new fellows will start in March for 2024. I can send you all the links to all the different programs, all the different descriptions. But one thing I definitely like you to convey into your students or to your network is the earlier we can establish relationships, the other earliest we can establish um, communication, whether that's really LinkedIn's actually a pretty good tool for me. I didn't realize how valuable LinkedIn was going to be for me. Um,
Okay. So
Email,
you're
link.
saying people could just like search for you on LinkedIn and you'll accept their request and
Yeah,
they can connect with you that
100%.
way. Yeah.
And they can just reach out to me, message me. Um, and the thing about me is I still have my reporter mentality, right? You never know what little nugget is gonna turn out to be gold. So every nugget, every person, every resume has value. I mean, I look personally through every resume because
Well,
I would want people to give me that same courtesy. I
hmm
know the nerve and the anxiety and what it takes to send a resume out into
yeah,
the blue. You're just thinking it's going into the universe. You don't think
right.
you don't know if anybody's reading it. But I can tell you from the content side, and I'm in charge of it. I'm reading everything. I'm reading their resumes. I'm reading their cover letters. I'm going through it. I'm focused on that. So, uh,
What's some practical advice? I had a student in my office the other day who she's interested in working in baseball, and in some ways it seems like a catch 22. Like you might be looking for internship experience in order to get another internship at a higher organization, right, or a more significant type of entry level job. But if you're looking at a cover letter or a resume from, let's say, a college student looking for an internship, like what stands out to you? What should these kids be either working on in advance or focusing on when they're putting their best foot forward to make that introduction to you?
okay, that's a great question. Um, First, the resume has to be first, there's an understanding that's not I'm looking at a resume of a person that's not a candidate, that's not a finished product, right? I get that. I understand that. We are all work in progress. If you want to be real about it,
Right.
we're all unfinished products, right? So when I'm looking at a resume, I'm fully understanding there will be a certain amount of experience that a person might have or might lack. I get it. But what a candidate can do is make sure everything is spelled correctly. Make sure everything is clean. Clean copy can go a long way, especially when you are evaluating hundreds of resumes, because whether it's fair or not, will read a sloppy or a resume with a bunch of mistakes and say, wow, this is their best foot forward on a
Mhm.
resume, you know, and then you match that up with hundreds of others who are competing. You have to, that just can't be a mistake folks make. That
Right.
resume has to be clean. And another thing I really advise, and it means something to me, and I know it does to other evaluators, is the cover letter cannot be a copying paste type of thing. You'd be surprised how many times I'd see that, how many times I'd see a different company listed in my cover letter.
Mhm.
Um, you know,
Shows they
uh,
don't really care.
you
Yeah.
don't care.
Yeah.
What I want to see in a cover letter and what I advise you to share with your folks, and I tell people in general, if you're applying for a baseball job or whatever it is, talk about your qualifications, but talk about why you would fit in that job. If you want to work for baseball, tell me about your connection to the game. Tell me
Mhm.
about the mother and daughter game, catch. or the father and son or grandpa and granddaughter Dodger games or whatever it is, because I like hearing those stories. I like seeing the connection. And a well-crafted cover letter can really go a long way in terms of appealing to an evaluator, because the reality is you're looking at a lot of qualified students on these resumes. So you're looking for experience, you're looking for the cover letter, you're looking for skills, looking for how versatile they are. I mean, once upon a time, we could just be a writer, reporter only. So now it's like writer, reporter, video producer,
Mhm.
camera, podcast person, social media, all those skills count now. So I encourage people to be as versatile as they can, but in terms of, tangible things for candidates, a clean resume and a compelling cover letter.
Okay.
Um, that's the first thing.
Yeah, and it's interesting you mentioned like the make sure you make that connection to baseball clear. I feel like, just even having worked in baseball briefly, but having worked in sports for a long time, like that matters that like that you're invested in the game itself, because you're working a lot of days, a lot of hours, typically uh for lower pay than maybe you could make in other areas, and so caring about it really matters. On the other hand, I'm sure you're not looking for someone that is just starstruck and is looking to be like hanging out with the players either. So there's a balance there, and realistic expectations about what the job entails. It's a hard job, even though people see the glamour of the game, right?
Yeah, professionalism goes a long way, and you could be a professional at age 22. You can be a
Mm-hmm.
professional at age 20. You won't have all the experience, and that's okay. And that's okay. I mean, like I said, we're not expecting finished products, but I'm looking for desire. One thing I'm really looking for, and I think people look for in general, is resourcefulness.
Okay.
The ability to work on the fly, the ability to adjust, the ability to be resourceful. That for me, that's a separator. That's a separator. One of the things that stands out for me, and maybe it's because I covered high school sports, is like when I see someone who covered junior high sports or high school sports, I know what that's like. I know
Mm-hmm.
what it's like to get locked out of a press box. I know what it's like to not have internet or to
Right.
have to file a story from McDonald's or whatever it is. And another thing that's really important to me is the Zoom interviews. That's in that, I know Zoom people have mixed feelings on Zooms, but
Mm-hmm.
for me, it's a really valuable tool to have a conversation with someone and see where they're coming from. And I love honesty and transparency and humanity. Those are all things that mean a lot, you know.
Yeah. Um, a couple more questions. I know you have a son's birthday and need to pick up a
Yeah.
cake and things like that, but it's one thing to have these opportunities and just to like list them on a website and wait for their resumes to show up. But I know a big part of what you do is actively go out and try to meet people and like seek these candidates. What are some examples of ways that you're proactively building this pipeline?
Well, I'm here with you. So the proof's in the pudding, right?
Right.
Um, so this is what I do. I think I rely on my communication and my reporter skills to establish sources, to establish networks, to establish relationships with people. Um, I go to several different schools. If they have a media week or something similar, I'll go there and I'll attend conferences. One of the things I do is, we attend all the different, diverse journalism conference, whether it's NABJ, NAHJ, LGBTQ, you name it, we have a presence there. And in addition to that, I'm going to schools and I'm trying to establish relationships with schools. And there's also professional, like society professional journalists, organizations that exist that are looking to provide candidates. I really don't leave any stone unturned. I mean, I do approach it the way I do. I would approach it as a story. I try to establish all the relationship. Again, I know I'm half joking, but I'm really not with you. I mean, one of the reasons I wanted, obviously I wanted to talk to you and get to know you, and heard so much great things about you, so that's going to be great, but also to establish relationship with different schools, and
Hmm.
also let people know who is hiring. Let people see what a director at MLB looks like, and make it real. You know, make people understand I'm not from outer space. I was a first college graduate in my family. My dad was a migrant farm worker. We all have our stories, right? That's not, I mean, I've obviously never forgotten where I've come from, but that isn't everything I am. I'm present and future. This is what I'm trying to do is let people see someone. So it's just easy. I make myself available, whether it's LinkedIn or Twitter or email. I'm responding to everybody. I mean, I forget a long time ago, Mark Cuban said something about, Mavericks owner, he said something about responding to every email, right? And he reads every email. And shoot, it was probably 20 years ago or something, maybe. And I sent him an email just to see if he really does, you know? And I was like, damn it, he does. He really does. I'm like, if this guy who's, uh, the owner and have all these different businesses or whatever, takes the time out to respond to a random person
Yeah.
out there asking a question, I 100% can respond to someone who's putting their neck on the line, who has the courage to reach out and
Hmm.
try to get a job and is cold calling me. I respect that. I respect the effort. I respect the hustle. So if someone's hustling to meet me, that's huge for me, and they're gonna get my respect back.
No, that's great. I think that will be really inspiring for young people looking for jobs and just to realize there's a human on the
Yeah.
other end, and it's not an impossible dream. All right. So one last question, baseball question. Um, Favorite player of all time and your favorite Major League Baseball memory of all time. I'll tell you mine. Paul Molitor was my favorite player growing up, Milwaukee Brewers, and my favorite moment. It's the one of the few times I've cried with happiness. I would say it was when Cecil Cooper got a hit against the Angels at County Stadium in Milwaukee in 1982 that sent the Brewers to the World Series. That's every time I see a clip of that, like it takes me back to being 12 years old. So, is there
Yeah.
a player in a moment from your life that stands out?
Well, the moment I was a let me see, I think I was a senior in high school. I saw Nolan Ryan, seventh no hitter.
Wow.
Me and a bunch of buddies, we saw that. It was like grocery store night at the time. You go to a grocery store and they give you free tickets to games. Not a lot of people are going to Rangers games, I guess, but it was one of those nights where if you just get like, they were handing them out in the receipts, you know.
Wow.
So, we had our receipts and from the grocery store when we went to go watch the game, and it's Nolan Ryan. He throws a no hitter,
Amazing.
the seventh no hitter, man. And it was just like, wow, that was the best gallon of milk I ever bought because it came with this receipt to this no hitter. And in terms of my favorite player, it was Pudge Rodriguez.
Okay.
Avon Rodriguez for the Texas Rangers, a catcher there. He was one of
Yeah.
the first people I interviewed in '97. Um, so I got to know him. It's hard. I mean, I definitely understand the first time a early career person goes into a clubhouse and they're starstruck and you have
Hmm.
to pretend that you're not, because I
Hmm.
know what that's like. Because I went into there and I interviewed Pudge Rodriguez for the first time, and I don't remember anything he said. I don't even know if I was doodling or what. It was just like, I remember the guy asking, "Hey, what did Pudge say?" I'm like, "I don't know. I don't know what he said."
Yeah.
So I get it. And so years later, the Detroit Tigers had like a fiesta night or something like that, an event where Pudge was the guest speaker, and they asked me to be the moderator. So it was me and Pudge in this one-on-one kind of a fan fest thing. So that was really cool. And then the first and only time I've covered a Hall of Fame induction was when Pudge was inducted into the Hall of
Oh
Fame.
wow. All right.
So seeing Pudge at the Hall of Fame, him recognizing me, and just kind of knowing each other over the years. I was with my family. We're at an airport in Miami. We went into one of these, American Airlines center,
Uh-huh.
service center, concierge, whatever it is, at a long layover. And Pudge is in there. And he comes over and he says hello. And my wife was like, what? And so every once in a while I still have those pinch me moments. It's really with the players that I grew up with that I still look at and revere and like, wow, this isn't real. The reality is a lot of the players in the game now are much younger than I am.
Hmm.
They call a player who's 37, 38, like, oh, this guy's old. It's like, that
Right.
guy's 15 years younger than I am. He's not old. Uh, so it's the older people, retired players that I grew up with who I really am happy to meet. Buddy Bell was one of my favorite players growing up. So I got to know his sons along the way through baseball. So a lot of them were Texas Rangers. If you can tell, I still have passion for the game, right?
Yeah.
So I still love the game and I want other people to enjoy it. And I want other people to understand their opportunities off the field. I mean, on the field, we all want to be in the big leagues, right? But the reality is that's very difficult. It's possible, but it's difficult. But there are jobs in baseball, and there's people like me looking for you. And let's chat, find me. And the onus is on you. I'm gonna do my part, and the onus is on people to also reach out.
Mhm. Well, that's terrific, Jesse. Congrats to the Rangers on the World Series. And I know you were probably pretty thrilled about that, although they were playing a team in the town where you live
Right.
now. But this is great information. Hopefully, someone that watches this will be, or many people will be contacting you soon after seeing it and maybe be one of your success stories down the road. Jesse, have a great day. Happy birthday to your son. And we'll be talking to you soon. Take care.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate this.